If you grew up with a computer in your house, you probably owe something to two men who could not agree on what that machine should be. One sold you a sealed product that felt like furniture. The other licensed the software and let 100 companies fight over the plastic shell. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were not just founders. They were competing religions, design priesthood versus platform empire. And for 40 years, their argument leaked into every desk, every laptop, and every phone in your pocket. Jobs co-founded Apple in a garage, obsessed with control, taste, and products that felt inevitable the moment you touched them. Gates built Microsoft on a colder gospel, put Windows and Office on every desk, partner with PC makers, and win the volume war. The popular story is neat. Apple innovated, Microsoft copied, Windows owned the 90s, and the iPhone settled the score. That headline is half right. It skips the basic deal, the bailout, the lawsuit, and the truce that kept Apple alive long enough to come back. This is how two teenagers in the same valley built opposite visions of computing and spent decades trying to prove the other one wrong. I pulled the launch dates, the filings, and the market caps. The rivalry looks different once you see where the lines cross. Let's rewind to the mid-70s, when a personal computer was still a hobbyist fantasy built on plywood and optimism. Both men showed up at the Homebrew Computer Club in Silicon Valley. The same room, the same buzz, completely different endgames. Gates and Paul Allen saw the Altair and asked the obvious question: who will write the software that makes this thing useful? Jobs and Wozniak wanted the whole experience, hardware you could bring home, plug in, and show off to your friends that weekend. The Apple II became one of the first real hits, color graphics, a keyboard, and proof that normal people might actually buy this stuff. Microsoft's early wins were not machines. They were languages and operating systems, code you licensed while someone else sweated the factory floor. Before they were enemies, they were partners. Microsoft wrote software for the Macintosh, and both sides needed the other to exist. Then IBM walked in with the PC, and the industry stopped being a club for hobbyists and became a land grab for standards. Gates landed DOS on IBM's machine and kept the license terms that let Microsoft sell the same operating system to IBM's clones. Jobs bet the other way, a computer that was fully Apple's, fully integrated, and fully unwilling to let the clone army in the door. Both sides were chasing the same holy grail, making computers understandable without a computer science degree. Apple burned cash learning that lesson in public. The Lisa was ambitious, expensive, and not the mass-market weapon Jobs wanted. Microsoft learned the opposite lesson: own the application layer, and the operating system becomes the toll booth. In 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh. Mouse, Windows, icons, and a Super Bowl ad that treated computers like pop culture. Microsoft shipped Windows, a graphical layer on top of DOS that looked familiar if you had ever sat in front of a Mac. Gates demoed Microsoft applications on the Mac at Apple's events. Cooperation on stage, while lawyers were already drafting the war letters. Jobs marketed the Mac like a cultural event. Ridley Scott's 1984 ad told you Apple was not selling spreadsheets. It was selling rebellion. Compaq and dozens of clone makers proved Gates' model. Microsoft did not need the coolest machine. It needed the standard. Jobs looked at Windows and saw theft. Not of code necessarily, but of the look and feel Apple had spent years polishing. The Valley gossip was brutal. Friends became rivals. Rivals became symbols of everything the other side hated about business. Through the late 80s, Windows was climbing and the Mac was still respected, but the slope was already tilting toward volume. Microsoft did not need to beat Apple in a fair fight. It needed one winning platform and an army of manufacturers racing to the bottom on price. Apple stayed premium, beloved in schools and design studios, but priced out of the corporate cubicle war. Microsoft was winning. Both companies went public. Both made fortunes. And both started believing their own mythologies a little too loudly. But this next part is where the rivalry stops being about products and starts being about power inside Apple itself. Apple hired Pepsi executive John Sculley to professionalize the company. Classic story of a founder meeting the grown-up table. Microsoft courted developers aggressively. If your app ran on Windows, you inherited the entire clone ecosystem for free. In 1985, Jobs lost an internal battle with CEO John Sculley and was pushed out of the company he had founded. While Jobs was in exile, Microsoft shipped Windows versions that finally felt good enough for mainstream offices to standardize on PCs. Apple sued Microsoft in 1988, claiming Windows copied the Macintosh interface. The courts mostly sided with Microsoft. Jobs founded Next, expensive, beautiful workstations aimed at universities and developers who still believed in his taste. Pixar's Toy Story in 1995 proved Jobs could win outside Apple. Animation as software, storytelling as engineering. Every beige box rolling off an OEM line sent Microsoft a royalty, a business model that scaled faster than any single factory Jobs could own. Microsoft launched Windows 95 with a marketing blitz so loud it felt like a national holiday for the PC industry. Windows plus Office became the default corporate stack, the bundle that printed money every time a company refreshed its desktops. Here is the chart from Act 2 with the rest of the decade filled in. Windows did not just win. It became the default heir in the room. By the mid-90s, Apple was bleeding cash, swapping CEOs, and looking like a design cult that had lost the mainstream. Microsoft faced antitrust scrutiny, the cost of winning so completely that regulators started treating you like a utility with attitude. Then the internet showed up, and both companies had to guess whether the next war would be fought on the desktop or in the browser. Gates pivoted hard into the browser fight. Internet Explorer bundled with Windows, Netscape in the rear view, regulators taking notes. Apple experimented with licensing Mac clones, then killed the program. Another swing between openness and control that pleased nobody. When Gates stepped back from daily operations, Steve Ballmer ran Microsoft like a sales machine with a monopoly hangover. Both companies were slow to feel the smartphone earthquake coming, but only one would later define what a phone was supposed to feel like. Apple bought Next, and Jobs came back to a company weeks from bankruptcy, a rescue mission disguised as a second founding. At Macworld 1997, Gates appeared on screen, and Microsoft invested $150 million in Apple. Lifeline, Truce, and PR shock. Jobs killed confusing product lines, launched the iMac, and reminded people Apple was supposed to sell objects you wanted on your desk. Microsoft doubled down on enterprise, Windows, Office, servers, the boring infrastructure that prints recurring revenue. Jobs opened Apple stores when analysts said retail was dead, turning shopping into part of the product experience. The iPod made Apple a music company, 1,000 songs in your pocket, and a halo that made Windows users peak at Macs again. So here's the real issue. The rivalry was never only about PCs. The next platform was mobile, and only one side saw it early enough. In 2007, Jobs launched the iPhone, part phone, part iPod, part internet device, and a declaration that software belonged inside Apple's walls. Microsoft had Windows Mobile and enterprise phones, but the touchscreen consumer wave was not where its instincts were sharpest. The App Store turned developers into Apple's partners and prisoners at the same time. Another closed ecosystem, another job sermon. Gates gradually stepped away from day-to-day Microsoft to focus on philanthropy, a second act as large as the first. The iPad extended the same sermon. Post-PC devices where Apple owned the silicon, the software, and the store. Microsoft's consumer phone bets sputtered. Windows Phone. Proof that platform kings can whiff the consumer hardware pivot. Jobs also built a supply chain machine, securing flash memory and glass years ahead of rivals who still thought phones were accessories. Later, Microsoft bought its way into developer love again. GitHub, LinkedIn, enterprise gravity with a modern developer face. By the 2010s, investors stopped asking who won the 80s and started asking who owned the next platform shift. Watch Apple's market cap through 2007, near death in the 90s, then a climb that still looked modest next to Microsoft's .com peak. Jobs died in October 2011, but the product philosophy he fought for had already become the most copied playbook in consumer tech. Under Satya Nadella, Microsoft reinvented itself around Azure and subscriptions. Winning the cloud war, Jobs never tried to fight. Drop your take in the comments. And if you want more founder rivalries like this, you know what to do.